Hello, Irish fans. It is Sunday night, and that means it's time for the Mike Goolsby Show. Following Notre Dame's 34-6 win over the Naval Academy, Notre Dame improves to 8-1. Mike, you and I were talking before going on air here how interesting it was to see several Notre Dame defensive players at like different positions for the game, particularly starting with Jack Kaiser, who started at safety. What do you think that ultimately meant in terms of how they were going to defend Navy?
It was pretty apparent. I think Coach Freeman made the decision to swap he and Houston Griffith out in terms of just ability. Like Houston's been starting all year, and like Greg, you never hear his name called, like ever. It's like sometimes it feels like you're playing with 10 guys in the field. So I think that Coach Freeman probably thought that Kaiser was just better served to be a more dynamic tackler, more decisive in terms of his reads and coming downhill. We'll get into like some of the backup safeties, hopefully. Xavier Watts showed really, really, really well at the end of the game, as did a lot of young players. But, going into the game, I watched your and Tim's show last night. You guys did a bang out job. You guys are doing a good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, and one of the first things, like your takeaway, Greg, from the game was that was a boring game, in particular the first half. So when you do these shows and you're trying to provide some content for folks, it's like, gosh, you have to go through with a fine-tooth comb sometimes to try and find some talking points. And one of those talking points was going to be the usage of Coach Freeman's personnel. Yeah. They primarily played They played in like a 4-4, and they played out of like a 5-2/3-4, depending on how you want to slice it. So, and there was a lot of moving parts and a lot of toys for him to play with.
I know you beat in Omaha. You have a heightened familiarity with Xavier Watts, and I agree with you. The game seemed boring. We both rewatched it today, and it was still boring until the second half. And you saw some of these new guys come in, and I think one of the guys that really I'm so excited to see maybe get more playing time down the road is Xavier Watts. What do you think about him?
Yeah, so I got a chance to see him on two separate occasions in like a 7-on-7 type environment.
Yeah.
Before he took off for South Bend. And, my scouting report on him was like he wasn't a burner in terms of just flat out speed, but he was a really good football player, great body control and really good hands, ran good routes. So he may have found a home, put it that way, on the defensive side of the ball. He seems too small-ish to me to play the rover position.
Yeah.
I'm sure that time that he spent there just gave him a better understanding of the defense as a whole. But, I think it was his first tackle. Like, he came downhill, made a great tackle, and just like looked the part. And he's a really quiet kid, from what I understand. I met his father once, actually, too. But he's a really quiet kid, and I think he takes football really seriously, Greg. And there's another play, maybe his fourth or fifth snap of the game. They were in like they had twins outside, the slot receiver cracked back, and Xavier ran into it like full speed. And as any coach, and we've all heard this, but like as any coach would say, like if you're going to make a mistake, make it aggressively. And not that he made a mistake, but he was like, hey, if I screw up, I'm going to screw up going 100 miles an hour. And sometimes that's what playing defense is about. So it'll be interesting. And I mean, we could talk about the Houston Griffin like scenario, and that, he kind of left school and they kind of came back, and that's we'll call it drama, Greg, but like to kind of create that like preseason type drama and to not show up and to not show out thus far in the season kind of makes him look like an ass. And then when a kid that comes in and hasn't even played the positions full time this season comes in and looks better, it's just not a good look for Houston.
Yeah, and we talked about, I mean, what tape would he have shown other colleges of like highlights or exceptional play he had at Notre Dame? And I agree with you. Like, he just isn't a guy who you see flash a lot during the course of games. And so,
I'm just saying, I'm talking about, Greg.
I'm glad he's back because they need the bodies at that position, but like,
Well, maybe you go back to I don't know all the particulars of the transfer portal, but maybe a prospect. Not like look, we're jumping to saying he's going to transfer or something, but maybe you go off of his high school rankings. But I was forced to play inside linebacker, but like the dream position for most defensive players is a safety position. I mean, you get to do it all: run support, play coverage, blitz. And you just haven't heard his name called. So that's why we saw the switch with Kizer playing center field. When they played that 4-4 front, Jack was playing center field. And then when they went to that kind of 5-2/3-4 look, they had, I think they had Pryor. What I have in my notes. Yeah, they had Houston and Kizer playing like deep halves in that 5-2. So I thought it was interesting in terms of like the interchangeability and Coach Freeman and those toys again that he had to play with. I thought they maybe could have moved, Jack to like an outside linebacker and put Isaiah Pryor as that free safety. And Isaiah Pryor, just real quick, and I thought that I really feel like that he's definitely been an unsung hero.
Yeah.
I mean, he's like a Swiss Army knife, and hopefully he's going to play himself onto an NFL roster just because of his multiplicity. He can do a lot of different things for an NFL team.
I mean, he's a big kid, and then he had that fourth down cover in the fourth quarter as well. That was a nice play. They seem to be pretty interchangeable. Like you saw Pryor and Kizer either in coverage or up near the line of scrimmage during the course of the game. And when you played against Navy, 3 times? I know you were out for a year.
So back then, Greg,
how much do you guys rotate people? Because the snap count thing's going to be amazing tomorrow, because I think Notre Dame, they played, I want to say 11 defensive linemen. I might be wrong on that, but did you guys rotate that much when you were playing Navy?
No. So couple things. One, it's nice to have a fellow alum co-hosting, classing it up a little bit.
Singer.
I love Singer, but no, I'm kidding, Mike. I love you. So, but back then we hardly ever rotated. I mean, you would rotate your defensive line a little bit, but we played a lot. And Derek Curry, who I love, he was a co-captain, and he was my, he got me lined up a lot of times. In terms of playing out there, but we've talked, years later, and he alluded to that. He was like, man, we played so many snaps on defense. He's like, we could have had better stats or had more highlight tapes, and just had a stronger showing our senior year. If the offense would have been better, but I mean, there was a play. I think we played USC, Greg, one year. Maybe it was my junior year, and like defense had 97 snaps, and like you went back, like Courtney Watson he never came off the field. He literally played 97 snaps at inside linebacker.
That's nuts.
In 2002. So yes. So to answer your other question, Greg, I played against Navy twice, but then I also played against Air Force a handful of times too.
That's right.
Back then. So super familiar with all things option.
Mike Singer just said in the chat that he loves. Well, he said that he loves me, but he loves both of us. He's definitely tuning in. We have a couple questions about Logan Diggs. I mean, I think that's also one of the big takeaways, especially out of the fourth quarter when the game was getting exciting. What'd you think about his performance?
I think that he looks more confident than Tyree does, just in terms of like overall demeanor. And sometimes you can fake it till you make it. But he looks like he belongs there, and like he's kind of owning that role. And then like just to look at him, like his physicality, like his build and things, like he almost looks, I don't know if there is a prototypical running back. I mean, you've got the Derrick Henrys of the world, and you've got, much smaller players, but he's got that like prototypical kind of size and overall look to him. And you can tell that both he and Kyron have kind of switched up like the overall running style. Like we alluded to that last week on the podcast. You're still not getting a ton of movement from our offensive line. So these guys have sort of switched up their style and been a little bit patient, and then popped out where it could be. So I'm really optimistic about, his future, and I wasn't as big of a Kyron fan last year as I've become this year, and but yeah, I think into the future to have a Logan Diggs and have a Chris Tyree back there, it's pretty dynamic.
Yeah, Logan Diggs. I mean, you know this because I know you train athletes. When people think about players that are physically ready for the college level, it's not about how big your biceps are. It's particularly in the lower body. And Logan
Yeah,
Diggs looks like he's been on the squat rack for 10 years. I mean,
sure.
he's a pretty built dude.
Yeah, and I think when talking about, just to touch on this real quick too, like when training like youth athletes, especially at the high school level, they're young men, they've got all that testosterone, and they want to get big,
Mhm.
and it's important to draw a line between definitely a difference between being big for the sake of being big and being strong.
Right.
Right, there has to be a balance. You want to be as strong as possible, but don't. So if whatever he is, 210, he looks like he's probably 210. If I had to guess, 205, 210, great size for running back, and yeah, definitely looks the part for sure.
Make sure to hit like on this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, please sign up for our newsletter on blueandgold.com. You can get that on the front page of our website. It's also in the description of any video we have on YouTube, as well as embedded in most of our content as well. Mike, let's talk about Jack Coan.
Let's.
I understand Todd Suarez's point here. I mean, it seems every game we come out of, there's a contingent of Notre Dame fans who either want to see exclusively Tyler Buchner. They want to think about the future and play more of Tyler Buchner. But you can't argue with Jack Coan's numbers. I do see where you want him to do things better, but at the end of the day, they're 8-1, and he's putting up the numbers you see here.
Yeah, but why is it? Yeah, I know this is my show, Greg, but why is it that like you read comments and you just get the overall sense from people following a Notre Dame game? I just don't think that Jack Coan, he just doesn't. There's not much exciting about him. He's just very sort of bland, and I
Yeah.
think that people tend to look at upside and look at. There's always the argument of potential versus production, right? So like Jack Coan's giving you a little bit of or a fair bit of production, but you don't see as much potential as you do with Buchner. Um, he has seemed like he's figured out the deep ball, at least this game, and Kevin Austin had a whale of a game. I think that Jack Coan's biggest area of improvement at this point is the pocket presence. It's very strange how he always tends to move up, and the other takeaway too, Greg, was like, and I think they even mentioned this on the actual television broadcast, he has happy feet still. So he has
Yeah.
time, even though he did take a couple sacks or a few sacks against Navy, which is too bad. But he's getting rid of the ball sooner than he has to, even when he has time. He did miss some throws. But yeah. And then this was another one of those games, Greg, where we needed a quote unquote spark, right?
Right.
So I think Tyler went in on the fourth or fifth offensive series and marched down the field, converted 2 third downs. 2 of them I think he did with his legs, and 1 he did through the air. So I don't have a problem with the way like the usage. Like this game was a perfect scenario. It's like, let's give Tyler a whole series, which Mike Singer and I talked about last week. Give him a whole series, let him continue to get his feet wet, and really he's just got to get over that kind of play anxiety that you see, or that you've seen through him kind of sailing some balls at this point. So I'm glad that we have Jack Coan for sure.
Yeah.
But the future is elsewhere.
Well, what'd you think about Tyler Buchner in that first half drive? He comes in, was exceptional on third down, and leads Notre Dame to a touchdown, their first one of the game.
Yeah, so you can see on his touchdown throw, he's got a whip for an arm, man. Like it pops out of his arm. And I've talked about like the way Kaiser throws the ball, and that he kind of, to me, he sort of pushes it. Greg, do you have any kids? Do you have children?
I have 2, yes.
So how old are they? How old are
They're
they?
9 and 7.
So like when they were a little bit younger, I presume you played catch with them.
Sure.
Like where you sort of kind of guide the ball to them. When I watch Jack Coan, throw a ball, it looks like he's trying to play catch with a little kid.
Yeah.
It's almost like he's just trying to just do it just so. So I don't even know what the question was, but
Just talking Tyler
yeah,
Buckner
but yeah,
and that drive.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah. Buckner looked great, and again, he picked up 2 third downs.
yeah.
Um, and we already know he helps. It helps in the run game, and I just think that my whole thought process of being pro Buckner in terms of developing him and bringing him along, Greg, was like in those big time games against an Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, you name it, right?
Yeah.
You want a dynamic athlete at that position. You need a dynamic athlete at that position to sometimes make some magic. Whereas Cone doesn't have a lot of magic. It's like if everything's blocked well and people get open, he'll deliver the ball. But when you play against these elite level teams, it's not always going to be clean. And I think Tyler can give us a little bit of that magic to get us over the hump in those big time games playing against those NFL type athletes.
We'll get to Thomas's question right now. How do you feel about our next game against Virginia? We still don't know, I think, the status of Armstrong, their quarterback, and we know they've relied on him a lot to throw the ball around the field 50 times a game.
Yeah, there's been a couple games I thought we might lose to UNC, Greg, and somehow we always end up pulling it out. So it's like, how do I feel about it without doing any homework on Virginia at this point? I feel like it'll be kind of an ugly game, and we're going to end up winning it ugly. It's just, I think it's good for us to go on the road. Hopefully, it's a night game type atmosphere, but we all agree we came out a little flat. It's a day game at Notre Dame Stadium against Navy, so I think it's always good for us to go on the road. I think we have a little bit more juice going on the road, so just keep winning. That's all you can say.
Let me ask you a question going back to Jack Coan, that the touchdown pass he had to Kevin Austin, the 70-yarder.
Sure.
What were your thoughts on that play? Was that him scouting the safety for Navy not being all that good, or did he miss a back shoulder throw here? What do you think? You know what I mean? Because if it's he threw it inside, if that's an elite safety, that's a pick.
So give me a couple minutes to talk this through.
Mm-hmm.
So
go for it.
They were playing like a sort of a cloud coverage, a cover 2. So you can teach cover 2 corners to play it technique-wise, play it one way. You want to reroute somebody into the safety, so which gives the safety less ground to cover, if that makes sense. Or they want to reroute the receiver to the outside to make it a harder throw where the quarterback has less real estate between the sideline, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So it was nice to see Austin like sort of get off a little bit of like press coverage where he used his hands, kind of had a nice little swim move. I thought the corner kind of played it lazily, which gave Kevin a free release. I don't think it was supposed to be a back shoulder fade. I don't think that Jack kind of scouted the safety. I think the safety was a step slow. I mean, it's not, a safety from LSU or something playing, right, Greg? So maybe a little bit lesser athlete at that position that was trying to make a play, and probably took a little bit of a bad angle. But that was a close call. I mean, if that safety was a half a step quicker, that would have been an interception. So it looks great on paper. And then again, so going back to Jack's stats, so we had a 38-yard pass to Kevin Austin, which was a beautiful catch earlier in the game, and then you had that 70-yard touchdown. So do the math. You take off. If Jack threw for what, 270?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I put myself on mute because my washer dryer's going nuts right above me. But he was 23 of 29 for. It was under 300 yards, but more than 250 yards. Let me bring that up.
Yeah, I think it was 269 off the top of my head. But yeah, that's part of podcasting, Greg. You got dryers, you got kids, you got dogs barking. It's what we do. But regardless,
I got it right here. Yeah,
269. Yeah. So you say, okay, well, Jack had a great game, so 269 minus 111. You can kind of do the math. I can't. I'm no good with numbers, but that was 2 chunk plays that we love to see. But I guess it maybe makes Jack's performance on paper a little bit less spectacular. But it's really, 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 really nice to see Kevin Austin start making some plays and putting some of that God-given ability to work. I was ecstatic for him because he is I don't think he's like as fluid of an athlete as like a Chase Claypool was. He's a little bit more linear. He kind of reminds me more of Miles Boykin in terms of the way that he plays the game. But great play. If Tyler Buckner had thrown that ball, Greg, it might have got there a split second earlier. It might not have been as close of a call, in my estimation. You there, Greg?
Sorry there. My washer and dryer just stopped. I'm sorry. It was nuts.
Oh, I can't hear it on. Yeah, we can't hear it on our end. On my
Okay,
end,
good,
anyway.
good. Want to ask you about Kurt Hinish. 10 tackles on the night or on the day. He's just. I'm so happy for the guy. He got the game ball. He's played in more games than any other player in Notre Dame history. I want to ask you who was that kind of guy on your team back at Notre Dame? The player that was just kind of the old man of the group, for lack of a better term.
No, that's a great question, Greg. And I echo your sentiments in regards to Kurt for sure. And he's played against this offensive system so many times. It's like you'd almost be like a GA almost on the field or another coach on the field. But our version of that, I would have to say it would have been Kyle Budensack.
Yeah.
Who was probably the least heralded recruit in my recruiting class, a 3-star type kid, ended up being the second kid in our class to actually play. Matt Lavecchio played as a true freshman as a quarterback, but Kyle was a strong side defensive end starter for like 3.5 years. Would end a year having like 28 tackles and maybe a couple sacks, but like his job was to keep tight ends and keep offensive tackles off of us linebackers. And he was just, did it well and took his job super seriously. And ironically that you bring him up, when we played Navy my senior year, we played him in an NFL stadium. It might've been the Ravens. I don't remember where we played him. Again, I have no memory, but, we're like halfway through the first quarter and Kyle's screaming at me because I'm making the wrong reads where I'm supposed to get the fullback and he's going to take the quarterback or vice versa. And he's like screaming at me because he took his job really seriously. He did really wasn't again, was never really going to get his name in the paper per se, but just consistent. And I had a coach tell me a long time ago, Greg, that consistency is the truest measure of performance. And Kurt has been a very consistent, albeit unheralded player, and I would say Budensack was the same way. I'll have to text him, let him know I gave him a shout out here.
Jamie McNeil asked, does Austin need to return next year to polish up his game and do better in the NFL draft?
Kevin Absolutely. Yeah. No question. Yeah. And again, you're looking for consistency. So he's shown flashes of being great, but I would think another year, and hell, we need him back based off our receiver numbers. So I think that I don't even think it'll be a question in his mind. If it is a question in his mind, I think that Coach Kelly and staff can make a really honest appeal to him and say, listen, dude, you're going to be the guy, right?
Right.
Based off the youth behind him.
And the receiver group, that's another topic that's a worry here going the last 3 weeks of the season is with Avery Davis, and we don't know the extent of his injury, but they're down to 5 scholarship wide receivers, one of which has not played yet, Jaden Thomas, and Kevin Austin is he's going to have to step up big time. They can't afford another injury there. They might have to go to like a Chris Salerno who's a walk on. Who knows? But
yes. Well, I would say like, and this is me trying to peel things back a little bit. So with a player like Kevin Austin, where the ability is fairly obvious to all of us, like, man, the kid's got the size, the length, looks the part, long strider, borderline suspect hands at times. But I think confidence might be a bit of an issue, or was a bit of an issue with Kevin Austin. So keeping with that, Greg, like when you're thrust into being the guy, and really there's based off the depth chart, there's zero chance I'm coming out of the game, even if I drop 2 balls. Sometimes with a guy that's struggling with confidence, that's what they need is like, okay, I'm not going to get sat down. I'm not going to get screamed at. Like I have to go produce. Uh, so I would think that you would start to see Kevin Austin's kind of star continue to rise based off of that. So you can put all the nerves. I'm not getting rotated out. Like I'm the guy now, and watch and see what happens. I'm excited for him.
Yeah, they're going to get a lot of opportunity, I think, starting next week to catch the ball. Virginia's been giving up a ton of yardage and a ton of points, particularly through the air. I think a lot of people saw that game against North Carolina a couple weeks ago. And then, against BYU a couple weeks ago, and it was there was like no defense. I mean, it was just like passing the ball all around the line.
That happens, right? And then you'll see guys like that always amazes me. Like Oklahoma doesn't play defense traditionally, and then they'll always have like a linebacker go in the first 2 rounds, and they always have like a defensive end. It's like, how do you draft it? Like if you had NFL talent on your defense, how are you giving up 40 a game? It's so strange to me.
Yeah, it's another thing, kind of a side topic you and I talked about. I laughed at this question. I think you were maybe asking kind of tongue in cheek, but you're like, what is Brian Polin's obsession with playing walk-ons as punt returners? Because we just brought up the fact that Chris Salerno might be pressed into action at wide receiver as a walk-on.
Yeah, I don't get it personally. Now, granted, now I also don't get having your best player on offense in Kyron back there either, right? I don't get it. So I know there's a trust factor and all that. But yeah, we've always had whoever it was last year, I forget the name, but we had and I don't know if our punt returner last year ever returned a punt. Like it was fair catch all the time. And this goes back to like, I'm picturing a big time game. We're playing, well, it's hypothetically, Greg, we're playing Alabama in the Final Four, right? And it's like you need to manufacture excitement. You need to manufacture points. You need to manufacture field position. Like you got to go, you have to empty out the drawer and be like, okay, what do we have to work with? And it's just, to me, it's just a missed opportunity to put a dynamic or a more dynamic athlete back there. I mean, it makes you feel good and all that, but put them on kickoff team versus having to be your kick returner. I just feel like it's a waste. I really do.
Right.
Also, hang on. Like Isaiah Foskey's on kickoff team. Like we have all of these starters that are playing special teams, and believe me, I get it. But like, I don't know if you have like your potential first round defensive end running down on kickoff team. Like, like, do we not have enough bodies? Like you've made the point. I know it's a leadership thing and all that, but the risk reward there is it doesn't compute in my brain.
Do you feel though that college football has trended that way though? I mean, it feels like more so than maybe 20 years ago, starters play more on coverage units.
Yeah, maybe. But again, who is it? Who had that expression? Was it Jimmy Johnson? Is like, I'm going to treat you all fair, but I'm not going to treat you all the same. So like an Isaiah Foskey, to me, categorically, is different than Drew White. They're both, starters.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at.
Todd Suarez, he asked, if the Navy game was played in the first week of October and the Cincy game yesterday, are we 9-0? Good question.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would agree. Yeah, I would agree. It's just, I hate to say this, but like, maybe a lot of fans would tend to agree with this or could relate. Part of me's kind of happy that we have one loss. I mean, could you imagine
the old like don't want to get blown out in the playoff argument?
Well, yeah, and I think Mike Singer, he said last week, he's like, I love conspiracy theory Goolsby, right? So like you get to see the coaches' votes, right, Greg, when it comes to like So I always feel like that like Dabo Swinney and Nick Saban always give Notre Dame votes like to get in. And I would think that they do that because they want to play us. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's an easier round one opponent. So this year I don't think we want to be in the playoffs because I do think we probably get dusted. by a Georgia. I mean, we're playing a third, fourth string tackles, and what they've done is remarkable.
Yeah.
What we've done this season is remarkable, and it goes back to that culture, figuring out how to win games. But I'm not upset that we have the one loss for that exact reason.
Can you imagine the narratives going on though? If Notre Dame were 9-0, you'd be answering for the rest of the college football world, saying, "Oh no, here we go again. You know, they're going to make the playoff. You're going to get crushed. You know, here's the list of teams with at least one loss that should get in before Notre Dame because we know what's going to happen to Notre Dame."
Yeah, that's the way it goes, and that's why, you know, this as an alum, like, people either love Notre Dame or they hate them. And scenarios like that, which you just mentioned, you're going to create more people that hate Notre Dame.
Right, exactly. I mean, you can't blame Notre Dame. They went undefeated those 2 years. You know, I mean, the 2 recent years where they made the playoff. I mean, what are you going to do?
Yeah. One last thought on that, Greg. Like, it goes back to, and I have to be critical, right? Because that's kind of what I'm paid to do here, in trying to, find interesting sort of viewpoints on things. But, like, you need a dynamic quarterback / athlete, big timer at that position. And then the only other thing that I was thinking about, and, like, I love what Freeman's doing on the recruiting trail. Like, we need secondary guys. Specifically, I saw a picture of Kyle Hamilton, like, basically dapping up Sonny Styles before the game.
Yeah.
I thought Kyle Hamilton was big. Like, Sonny Styles looked like a defensive end standing next to him.
He's a big dude.
Crazy.
He was last spring when we had him at the Rivals camp in Indianapolis. I mean, he's a thick kid that can run. Singer brought up last week. He's like that. He's like Isaiah Simmons that went to Clemson a few years ago. Is now in the league. He's built the exact same way. There's no lie on his height. He's literally like 6'4". He's thick already, and he can run like a deer.
So we're getting these players in, but we need to get them. We need to get, like, high level, talented guys, competitive guys, long athletes out at the corner position. And then, as much as I love our defensive front, which has been a strength of the defense throughout the entirety of the year, we're small up front. And again, I'm talking playing the Bamas and playing the Georgias and the Ohio States of the world. Like, our defensive line looked to be the same size as Navy's offensive line, which is a little worrisome. So it's just another takeaway, just something to hopefully that's on our recruiting wish list, is a bit more size from our down linemen on defense.
Yeah, because Howard Cross isn't big. I wouldn't say either the Ademilolas are.
No.
But they sure played a lot yesterday and did the job. But yeah, I get your point. I mean, there isn't the Stephon Tuitt, Jerry Tillery type on the roster right now.
You nailed it. Yeah, the guys. We have a couple guys that we've recruited, like Jason Anye. Like, he could be one of those guys if you develop them. But I'm saying guys that physically, with their stature, the first guy off the bus type scenario, Greg. We need a few more of those guys. Because that's where I'm always looking at, like, if this is going to be a national championship program, what's missing, right?
These two here, Riley Mills is the kind of that get off the bus guy, but he's still not getting a ton of reps. And then Ada Keenan Aina is a bigger kid.
Oh, he's a big boy. Yeah, he really jumped. Yeah, he got some kind of garbage time there at the end. Yeah, that looks like an SEC interior lineman, or 92 does.
Right.
Yep.
What did just going back to Jack Coan, we've had a couple questions come through since then, so I'm just gonna pop this one up there. Give Buckner or Pine more reps. I understand Coan is a good QB, and I appreciate what he has done for ND so far, but I think we've seen enough of him. I don't know if it's a tired topic yet, Mike, but it's certainly one that's lasted throughout the year. Well, I do get the argument. Like, I do want Tyler Buckner to play more. It seems like they missed. I mean, let's go to the drive sheet, because they had more drives than you can kind of ask for yesterday against Navy, but still
10 drives, right?
Yeah, there's still not a lot of time to play two quarterbacks with just 10 drives.
So what's interesting, where like in this game in particular, we were fortunate enough to be able to roll our threes in on defense. Like a guy like Prince Kali got to play again. Aforementioned Xavier Watts got to play. So like you would think that given this scenario, why couldn't we give Tyler one or two more series? You understand?
Mm-hmm.
So that was it's. You mentioned, is it a tired topic? It's not a tired topic. I mean, Notre Dame and the coaching staff, we did this to ourselves, right?
Yeah.
I think the big argument, like, if you had Pine out there versus Cone, it might not be that much chatter about it. It's just Cone is. I don't know if it's his demeanor. I can get into, and I have gotten into like his arm strength, the accuracy and things. I mean, I went back and rewound that first deep ball that he threw out to Austin, and I think it was like a 38-yard throw. And to me, that's about the max that you're going to get out of Jack's ability to accurately throw the ball downfield.
Yep.
So that being said, it still was nice to see and nice to get that connection. But that's why I don't know. I just feel like you'd have to do a survey of Notre Dame fans across the board. But what is it that irks people about Jack Coan? Is it, again, his demeanor, his approach to the game? He's just kind of very stoic. I really don't know what it is, but I just think he's uninspiring. Is really what, like, we know what we have, and everybody wants to play with that shiny new toy, and we keep getting it taken away from us in Tyler.
Yeah, I think we both agree that we're glad Notre Dame has him. I mean, I don't know if they're 8-1, and to D-Rock Irish's point, what can you complain about? I just think Notre Dame fans now are acutely aware of what you mentioned earlier. Like, for Notre Dame to compete with Alabama or Georgia, their quarterback has to be awesome. You look at who Alabama's lost to over the past few years. I mean, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, Johnny Manziel, Trevor Lawrence. I think when they lost to Ole Miss maybe 4 or 5 years ago, it might have been Jevin Sneed. So not a Heisman winner, but you know what I mean? Like for Notre Dame to do that sort of thing where you beat an Alabama, you need a crazy good quarterback. And I think Notre Dame fans, like I said, are aware of that now. And Jack Coan is not that, although I think he's done very admirably so far this year.
Yeah, he's more of a throwback type player. And then like I said, but there's still, for as much experience as he has, like the happy feet that we saw this last game, and that, like, bro, you have 4 seconds, 5 seconds to throw the ball some of these times. Mm-hmm. And then like he's like 1,000, 2,000, he just gets rid of it, or he scurries up in the pocket and sacks himself. Stuff like that's just, you're not getting the upside of Buchner, and then you're still getting these stupid kind of like mistakes. Anytime he leaves the pocket, like he drifts away, and then like he's just going to throw the ball away. Whereas like if that was a rep with Tyler, he might be able to make something happen. And people see that. I mean, my father texted me during the game. He's like, "This is a shit show." He's like, "Pick a quarterback already." It's like even he's upset. I mean, he's a huge Notre Dame fan. Even he's upset. Like, figure this out, guys. So, and the sad part is that Pine. That's the saddest part. I mean, we're gonna get to see enough Tyler Buchner, or see more of Tyler into the future. And Drew Pine's really it's kind of sad, right? Because when he was called upon, he did really, really well, and then he's just put him back on the shelf. So that's the bummer in the scenario to me.
True comment here from PJ Mac 550355. It was like Alabama's loss came to a Heisman Trophy candidate. That's correct, but I think just overall, I mean, particularly when Notre Dame has played those teams in the playoffs, they go into those games down 21 because of the difference at the quarterback position. They brought, I mean, I love Ian Book, but they brought him against Trevor Lawrence, and they brought him, I guess Mac Jones. I mean, he was ended up being a first-round draft pick, but
there you go. Yeah. Well, PJ Mac, forgive us for having an opinion, but like, outliers don't prove your argument, and just in general. Yeah. So yeah, that'd be a bit of an outlier, but we're talking about big time scenarios, big time matchups, those high energy SEC games. You're playing against NFL type athletes on the opposition, and you need a bit of magic, and I think Tyler's got a lot of it.
I know you're a defense guy, but the offensive line has probably been the second most talked about topic for Notre Dame this year. Just what are your thoughts on how Joe Alt has been doing and the future and the development with Blake Fisher, who looks like he's walking around pretty well on the sidelines, right?
Yeah, so I'm gonna go back to my buddy Kyle Budensack that I just mentioned. So like Kyle, probably as a, whatever he is, 39, 40 years old now, probably walks around at 220, 225, 230. Like that's his normal walk around weight, whereas he had to get up to like 270 to play a strong side defensive end. And this poor kid, Greg, would eat constantly. He'd be stuffed and he'd be like laying on the floor eating pretzels, just trying to get as much food into his system so he could maintain that weight.
Yeah.
So what Joe Alt has done over the last 12, 14, 16 months to go from being like a 240 pound ish tight end to being a close to 300 pounder, and to maintain that weight while being a full-time starter as a true freshman with the course load and all of that stuff is beyond remarkable. It truly is. And I said kind of tongue-in-cheek earlier in the season, like when the offensive line started to turn around, Greg, like maybe Joe Alt is your midseason MVP, like legitimately. Blake Fisher, he might be better suited as a right tackle just because I don't think that he has the athleticism and the feet that Alt does. So it's not a knock at all on Blake Fisher, but Blake Fisher is a massive human being. And I remember in my time in the NFL, the 2 cups of coffee that I had there, like when I was in Dallas, they had a guy named Flozell Adams. They used to call him Flozell the Hotel because he was so big.
Yeah.
Like you'd stand next to him. He's such a big human being that like, how the hell is anybody supposed to be able to get around him? He's just so big, and that's almost what you have in Blake Fisher is just the sheer size. So either way, between those two, it looks like you've got your next crop of kind of marquee, Notre Dame offensive linemen.
Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit the like button for this video. That helps us a whole lot with getting these videos out to as many Notre Dame fans as possible. Look out for that newsletter on blueandgold.com. Mike Goolsby is always with us on either Sunday live or sometimes maybe a little bit later in the week as well. Mike, thank you again, man. Your shows are awesome. Your input is awesome. And we'll do it all again next week. How's that sound?
Sounds good to me, Greg.
All right, guys. We'll see y'all later.